Oh,
I'll
heck,
start again just for the recording. Right. Good evening, everybody. Lovely to see you. Thank you for your time. We're really delighted that you've joined us this evening for our Ignite session. If you haven't met me before, I'm Deb Outhwaite. I'm the current Balmas Chair. Over to you, Megan.
hello, I'm Megan Crawford. I'm an Emeritus Professor of Education, and I guess I've examined over 60 PhDs. How about that? Including somebody in the room, but I won't say who.
She admitted to it. Look, she gave a wave while you were talking.
There you are.
And that's one of the things we can talk about tonight. So there's a range of us here who are 10 years past, further past, just past, people who can talk about actually putting themselves up the Viva and that new experience versus what we've learnt from it the other side. And we've got Jill Forrester with us as well. That's exciting. I'm sure Jill's examined plenty in her time too. I'm feeling a bit old today because I did my 30th thesis this morning at UCL. So halfway then, Megan, presumably. Yep.
Yeah, and I stopped, to be honest, I stopped counting at about 55, so I may well be higher than that.
I don't see the point of counting anymore. I think the answer is enough the next time somebody asks. No, I've done plenty. Thank you. Okay, let's zoom around the room. I'm just going to go from the order that everybody's in my slides. If you haven't got your camera on, I won't ask you to introduce yourself. So if you want to put your camera on to say anything, but if you've got your camera off for good reason, then that's if you're driving or whatever, that's absolutely fine. So we'll just zoom around in the order that you're on my screen. And that means starting with Joe Bird. Hi, Joe. So if you just
Hi,
want to
Deb.
say who you are, where you come from, and what stage you're at in your doctoral journey.
Okay. Deb knows this. We've had a conversation only today. I'm Jo Bird. I work at Derby University in teacher education. I'm the assistant head there, and I'm submitting my thesis on Friday.
So what I said to Jo was we can give her some constructive comments. She might not have time to go back and edit before she submits on Friday, but she might well keep a set of notes for when she does a few changes after her Viva. So we'll come back. That's great. Thanks, Jo. Christina, I think you did this one last year as well, so it's great to have you back.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Kristina Motoka. I'm in the messy middle, I would say. I'm a doctoral student at the university, part-time at the University of Roehampton in the School of Education, and a leader in the early years for over 14 years. So I'm delighted to be, as always, here and part of this events. And Belmas is really close to my heart, so really lovely to be here. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. And we'll talk about that and sense of community and everything before we finish. Megan and I were just talking about that. Christina has the delightful job, everybody. Christina and I found out after we'd met at Balmas that we have this lovely personal connection. Christina runs the nursery where I sent my first baby, who will be 25 in a couple of months' time. So Christina is running that nursery, and it was a lovely nursery then, and I'm sure it's still a fabulous nursery under your care now. So it's that great link.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Emma.
Hello, everybody. I'm one of the more senior people in the sense that I finished my doctorate almost exactly 10 years ago, I've just realised, on balancing teaching and parenthood. I started it in a moment of complete insanity when my daughter was 6 months old, so it's always really easy to remember when I started it. And that same daughter is now 16 and having a complete meltdown over her GCSEs. So I might not be able to stay for the whole session for that reason. Some things get easier, but it's wonderful to be here.
And lovely to have you. And it's nice in this session to hear the different kind of perspectives, and we'll talk about that, the different kind of vantage points and things. And Emma and I have identical journeys. So I also started my doctorate about the same time, also finished in 2016, and also have a 16-year-old. He is not having a meltdown with his GCSEs. He just doesn't appear to be doing any work whatsoever. So I have no idea what results they'll look like. I'm trying not to think about it.
No. And Megan was indeed on my Viva panel, and she was wonderful, I have to say. So if you can get Megan for your panel, do. She could do a
Oh,
few more.
she could do a few more. I
She
don't
can
think
fit
she's
in a
done
few
enough.
more.
Ulrika?
Yeah, so I'm Ulrika. I work in apprenticeships, and Deb and I we met actually last year at the IPTA conference, and I've just had my CP1 form signed off by my uni, and I'm in the middle of doing my ethics, which hopefully is going to go in this weekend. And I'm researching practitioner learning within the work-based learning space. So sort of quite a niche, yeah, sort of driven by my own experience. And yeah, sort of excited to be here this evening as well.
And remind me, Ulrika, were you in Wales?
Yes, I live in Wales, yes.
Yeah,
Grew up in Germany, trained initially into hospitality, but been in work-based learning for coming up to 8 years now.
interesting. And so the university you're doing your doctorate at?
Yeah, I'm at UE in Bristol.
Yeah, that's what I remembered. Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Lovely to have you with us. Wendy.
Hi everybody, my name is Wendy Conrad. I'm at the University of Derby. I finished my doctorate January last year, so it's it's not quite a distant past, but it's been quite a journey since then. So I've just finished and got my first principal investigator project signed off, and it's all done. And yeah, it's quite, you get the Viva done, you do all the amendments, and all of a sudden, yeah, you got all this other stuff chucked your way because suddenly now you have time. So it's quite exciting, really.
And we can talk about that. So we'll come back to that as part of the journey, the what you do know and what you don't know. So that's great. Thanks, Wendy. Helen.
Hi everybody. I'm Helen Newman. I did my doctorate at University of Staffordshire, and I work there as well, teaching English to international students. So I survived and passed my EdD last. I got the award through in September 2025, and Jill, who's with us tonight, Jill Forrester, was my wonderful supervisor.
Fabulous. Thanks, Helen. And I'm the external on that programme.
Yeah.
So always good to see that and to have that connection. Lejana, great session that you put on for the AI rig last week. Well done.
Thank you, Deb. Thank you very much. I'm Lejana Karouat. I work at my research is at the University of Birmingham. I come from engineering background, but my research connects engineering and educational leadership and the use of artificial intelligence for assessments and feedback in higher education. I just started my third year in PhD, and I'm very happy to be here and happy to see the faces that I met in Belma's conference last year. So yeah, thank you.
Fab. We're looking forward to hearing where you're up to in a little while, Lejana. That's great.
Thank you. Thank you, Deb.
Guessing that was me. I felt like I heard half my name.
Sorry.
Evening, everyone. My name's Jake Garwood. I'm a second year EdD student at the University of Hertfordshire, and I'm also a deputy head teacher at a primary school. I've been in post for about 2 years now. So compared to everybody else on here at the moment, I feel pretty new to the game. So, already quite reassured that lots of people at the other end of the journey and it is possible. But yeah,
Only
nice
just
to
at
be here.
times.
Yeah.
Great to have you with us, Jake. You're also on the same cohort. I don't know where along in that cohort with Leslie Boyle. I don't know if you've come across
Yes.
Leslie.
Yeah.
She's one of the teachers at Hearts. She was hoping to join us tonight, but they've had a family bereavement, so she's not with us. So that's good. Somebody to have that connection. Is it Caitlin or is it Kathleen?
It is Caitlin. Good morning, everyone. If my accent doesn't give me away, I am coming to you from Melbourne, Australia. It is currently 6:40 in the morning. On Thursday, so my day looks a little bit different to I imagine everyone else in the room. I'm currently a second year PhD candidate at the University of Melbourne, where I'm investigating middle leadership development. I will actually tick over into my third year in Cardiff at the Belmas Conference, so that's quite nice and serendipitous, and look forward to being in the same time zone in July.
And who's supervising you, Caitlin? Is it Laurie? Is it Helen? Is it Bernie? Is it David?
It is Laurie and David.
Laurie and David together.
So
Fabulous.
Laurie Drysdale and David Gurr, who are
Lovely.
familiar faces around Belmas.
Fabulous. We look forward to hearing about that. Terrific. Harry, so lovely to see you. Harry, is it frozen? No, he's there. Hello, Harry. Do you want to say hello?
Hello. Yeah, nice to see you too. I'm Harry Mante. I'm currently in Ghana, but I'm studying with the University of Nottingham. And Tony and Natalia are my supervisors. Yeah. So yeah.
What stage are you at now, Harry? What year are you in?
So I'm currently writing and development. Yeah.
Great. Okay, brilliant. We look forward to hearing about that. And this is the reason we leave the camera off, because Harry gets a better signal when the camera's off, don't you? So if you want to turn your camera off, we've seen you now, then you can take part in the conversation. That's absolutely fine. Lovely to have you with us, Harry. That's great.
All right, that's fine. Thank you.
So we've heard from, my screen's just jumping around a little bit. We've heard from Helen. Have we heard from Helen? No, Helen Chapman.
Hello, everyone. I'm so sorry I joined a few minutes late.
That's fine. Nice to see you.
And you. So I'm Dr. Helen Chatburn. I finished my EdD last year after a fantastic oral exam, which included Deb. Thank you so much. And my research is about teacher professional autonomy and how school leaders promote it and think about it. And more including the context of Nigerian international school leaders. So in my study, I was able to develop a profile of international school leaders in Nigeria, in addition to looking at the ways that they conceive of teacher professional autonomy and the practices around that. And
fabulous. So we'll come back to you for you to just do a sort of 2 or 3 minute slot, or a 3 to 5 minute slot, or whatever, however we time it, in a little while. But terrific to have you here, Helen. That's great. And good signal from Nigeria too, which is lovely. Rosemary, you don't have to, if you're driving or anything and you need to keep your camera off, that's absolutely fine. I'm just looking to check that we've caught everybody, because otherwise we've just got Jill. I think we've done it. Oh, Rosemary, do you want to say something? Hello, nice to have you with us.
Yeah, hello. Good evening.
Good evening. So if you want to just say where you are and what stage you're at, that would be great.
I'm just joining. I don't actually know the stage of what we are discussing about. This is my first time of joining.
So let me start again. Sorry, I didn't realize you'd just come in, because I can't see quite everybody's screens on my screen. So we're just at the stage where we've just introduced who we are. So we've just said our names and what stage we are through our doctorates, so whether or not we're mid-stage or coming up to finish or finished 5 or 10 years ago, wherever we are on that journey, and where we are, so who we studied with or what our topic is. Just 1 minute, that's all.
Okay, thank you so much. I am Rosemary Evans Obinna. You already see my name. I concluded my PhD past is it 10 years ago? 15 years ago. And I'm a lecturer with my university here in Nigeria. I'm an associate professor.
Fabulous. That's great, Rosemary. And another person who's been through that journey and is working in higher education. So when we talk about what comes afterwards, you'll be able to contribute very well to that conversation later on. So that's terrific. Lovely to have you with us. Okay, I think we've done everybody's
Thank you.
You're welcome. I think we've done everybody's introductions. So the plan from Megan and I is for you to volunteer. We don't want to put anybody on the spot. We're going to volunteer. We're not particularly going to time you, but we're certainly not going to let you talk for any more than 5 minutes. So if you want to talk about your thesis and about what it is you're actually doing, you want to take, say, 3 to 5 minutes, and you want to choose when you want to go, that's all absolutely fine. So Helen has prepared slides. Not Helen Chapman, don't worry, don't panic. Helen, the other Helen, has prepared slides. That absolutely wasn't part of the deal. You didn't have to do that, but sometimes it's nice. Some of you will do, some of you who haven't submitted yet may do a formal presentation at the start of your Viva, and some people do present a PowerPoint slide as part of that. So Helen has got slides, but absolutely no expectation about that. This is about listening to you articulate what it is you're doing, why you're doing it, what their interests are for doing it, and then us to sort of talk about that for a few minutes, and then we'll move on to somebody else. Does that all make sense? Everybody happy? Anybody want to volunteer to go first? Christina, I thought you might because you were here last year. I think that really makes sense. Well done.
Thank you. I'm trying to be brave, so to open the to break the ice, like they say. So, as I said, my name is Christina Motoka. I'm a part-time PhD doctoral student at the University of Roehampton in the School of Education, and I also work as a leader, and I've started as an educator in the early years sector. And this year in September will be my 15th academic year. So I started bottom up in the early years, so I know the both sizes of the coin. After 14 years working in early year sector, I kept noticing the same thing. Policies would change, new initiatives would be introduced, but in practice, many of the same challenges remained. So I began to ask, why does this keep happening? And through my doctoral journey, supported by my supervisors and shaped through attending and presenting at conferences and events such as the Belmas Society, I had the opportunity to engage with researchers, with practitioners and leaders. For me, Belmas has been a space where ideas can be explored openly in a supportive and thoughtful environment. And those conversations have helped me to refine and shape the focus of this research. So my doctoral thesis is titled Policy Development, Implementation and Disconnection, exploring stakeholders' perspectives on the workforce crisis in England's early years sector. Focuses on the workforce policies and how these are developed and implemented, and most importantly, experienced in practice. The early years sector in England continues to face a long-standing challenges in terms of recruitment and retention, in terms of qualifications, low pay, and issues in terms of professional status. So despite sustained policy reform particularly since 1997, when policies had taken a different turn within the early years sector. Many of these challenges continued to persist. So then the question becomes, why do policies not always translate into practice as intended? And what does this mean for the people working in the sector, particularly in a context of ongoing workforce challenges such as recruitment, retention, professional development, qualification, and professional status? So rather than assuming that policies simply fail, my research explore how disconnects may emerge between policy and everyday practice, and how these are in fact experienced by those working in the sector, such as early years educators. And when I refer to stakeholders, I refer to early years educators, leaders, and policy actors. So my research is in fact moving beyond describing those workforce challenges within the sector towards understanding the relationship between what policies are designed to achieve and how they're actually enacted in practice. To explore this, I adopt a qualitative interpretivist approach. I'm using two data strands. I analyze early years policy documents since 1997 onwards to examine how workforce issues are framed over time. And I combine with interviews with educators, leaders, and policy actors to explore how these policies are understood and implemented in practice. So the study uses the triangulation of data to see where there are alignment or there are contradiction between those policies and how those are experienced in practice by those working within the context. The study is informed by the work of Quintus Skinner and Michael Lipsky, which allow me to explore both how policies are understood or are constructed, and how they are enacted on the ground. At the sector level, this research brings forward the lived experiences of those working in the early years sector, voices that are often unrepresented in policy documents. And at the national level, it contributes to how workforce policies are designed and implemented with the aim of supporting better alignment between policy intention and the practical realities. Ultimately, this research is about understanding not just what policy say, but in fact what they actually do in the real practice. So, and what is actually this means for those working within the sector and how to make them work for those that they working within the earlier sector. Thank you so much.
Almost perfectly 5 minutes. Well done, Christina. Who would like to ask Christina some questions? Caitlin? Yeah, do.
Christina, I'm interested to understand a bit more about the policy context that you're exploring. From what you're saying, it sounds like you're talking about macro policy, like government policy is what it sounds like, as opposed to internal institution policy.
Right.
When you're looking at practice, is there at all a relationship between how the macro policy is implemented in a micro policy manner, i.e. in the actual institution?
So I'm looking at national level policy rather than internal policy. So I'm not looking, but I'm looking how those national policies that, as we know, often they top-down driven, how are interpreted and adopted by those working on the ground and understood and put into practice. And despite continuous changes within the policy, so issues and challenges persist and continue within the sector. So I want to understand if there may be a disconnect between how these policies are developed and the actual the practical realities.
Crystal clear, thank you.
Thank you.
Joe, did you have a question? I know you have an early
I
years
did,
background.
Christina, but you answered it as you were talking. I was just wondering if you'd actually done the analysis of policy yet, but
no, yet. I am in the
what-
process
yeah.
of starting. So I'm looking particularly. I'm interested about national within the English context. So national policies that are looking particularly at the workforce from 1997 onwards. However, I'm looking at some documents as well that they may have had implications for those policies from 1997 onwards being developed. So yeah, I'm just in the process of that. That's why I said I am in the messy middle.
Thank you. Yeah, I realised as you were talking. That's why I put the hand down. Thank you.
Thank you.
And for those of you who haven't seen the chat, there's quite a lot going on in the chat. Megan, do you just want to hop in and talk about this book that you're just recommending?
I'm sorry, my typing is terrible.
Don't worry, I
I'm
think
not
we all
really.
know it's published by Routledge, it's fine.
Now, I think it's anyone who's looking at leadership and educational policy, but it's well worth getting hold of this book for many reasons. Dan had a forensic eye for policy and how it worked. And he also makes some very useful tips in there for writing about policy and other aspects of educational leadership. And it's a book that I often recommend to my doctoral students who aren't doing policy as well as those doing policy, because he also discusses ethical issues in quite a lot of detail. So I'm sure you can get it in your library or from
Thank you
wherever
so
you
much,
get your
Megan.
books. But
I appreciate that.
it's
I
a
will
great book.
definitely look into it. Thank you.
Well done, Christina. That was great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice way of kicking us off this evening. Fab.
Thank
Helen, have you decided what you're doing about your slides? I think you should share them.
I will share them, yes.
It gives people an alternative format of presentation then, doesn't it?
And it also keeps me on track rather than just... Let's see if I can get them on the screen.
Fab, we can see those now. Over to you.
You can see the
Yep.
Yeah, okay, lovely. I was just hoping that you couldn't see my Outlook box. Well, you can't yet. Okay, so I'm Helen Newman. As I said, I passed last September. And my focus of interest is further education managers and lecturers and their perspectives and experiences of casual and insecure employment contracts. And it was a narrative study. Now, by casual contract, I mean supply, 0-hour, temporary, fixed term, term time only, agency, proportional, anything which is insecure. And it was set within the policy changes from 1992. I actually was working in 93 to 95 as a computing lecturer in further education. And I was on 0 hours contracts. I wasn't paid very much. I was expected to do a lot of work. And in the end, I left to move into the computer contracting industry. A few years later, I thought, I miss teaching. So I went back into teaching, back into further education, and back into 0 hours and proportional contracts. So it was after COVID, really, that my focus for my EdD really shaped. And that was because suddenly the college I'd been working for, I was on a permanent 0 hours contract, and they just stopped paying me completely. I couldn't access anything. I now have no money. I'd got savings, so I was okay, but I finally got a permanent job with them, and I was so happy and overwhelmed. And then I felt so angry because I was so experienced, I'd done so many years in FE, and yet it had taken that amount of time to get a permanent job. So that really made me focus on managers' and lecturers' perceptions of casual contracts. Because when I did lose, when they did stop paying me, and previously when they didn't have enough work for me, the manager that I was speaking to was very upset. So I was interested in the perceptions of managers as well as what happened to lecturers. And really, it was to invoke further discussion around the use of casualised contracts. I won't go through why they all came about, but looking at the FE policy part, further education is very, very under-researched and underfunded and overlooked. And we keep getting these things which say under-researched, underfunded, not given what it needs. But unfortunately, because it's not the sort of sexy place for ministers to go to, they go to FE and then they move on to something which they deem to be better. Since 2017, up to 2017, there'd be 28 pieces of legislation and 48 secretaries of state. And then between 2017 to 2024, which is when I finished doing the research, we'd had 5 prime ministers. So this led me to the research question of what is the policy of casualised employment and how is it experienced by managers and lecturers? And then what effect does it have upon academic managers' working lives and power relationships with the lecturers? What effect does it have upon the lecturers' working lives and their relationships? And I used a theoretical framework. It was tripartite. So it looked at the organisations as such. It looked at social. So I used Standing's precariat class theory. And it used Foucault's power theory. So the field of other possible actions and can you make different decisions? And also Parasia, can you actually speak about what is happening? So it was qualitative, it was autoethnographical because I was actually one of the people being interviewed. I was interviewed myself. I used thematic analysis and I developed idioms as headings because I noticed when I was looking at findings, all the time people were using the idioms to describe how they went through and what they were feeling. So my participants, I had 5 lecturers. They all had to have experience of casual contracts within the last 2 years, including myself. And then I had 5 managers, which I took from different echelons of the hierarchy, and they all worked for different organisations. So curriculum manager, head of department, head of faculty, deputy principal, and principal chief executive, because I wanted to try and get the full gamut of how the hierarchy of management felt about casual contracts. The findings for lecturers weren't surprising. They echoed very strongly the findings, which there's quite a lot of work been done on casual staff in higher education. So they echoed that, but you have to set the findings of the FE lecturer against the background of the poor pay which they receive in comparison to higher education. When I moved into higher education, I was on a part-time hourly contract, but it was 2.5 times more than I received as an FE lecturer on a part-time hourly contract. So for the lecturers, they stated they were living on a knife edge, financial and job insecurities, and this is what was said by some of them. It's always a question whether I was actually going to be able to make the mortgage payments. The manager called me up on the Friday to say the numbers hadn't come through. They were cutting all of my hours. I'd have 12 hours instead of 24. Many of them, including myself, worked for multiple FE colleges, multiple different jobs, teaching many different subjects, some of which you weren't familiar with, and at levels, many different levels. So one of the statements was, one day I would work at one college 9:15 to 12:30, another college 12:50 till 4, And then at the APFC, so other private funded college, 5:30 to 8:30. And then another one, I was teaching 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 subjects. Somebody was teaching 6 subjects. They felt second class and they resented their casual status. So one of the things they said was they just stopped giving you work. When you get given a proper contract, as it were, you feel a bit more valued. And a carrot and stick was used. So the stick was their own professionalism and the love for the job. When asked, why do you do this? They all came back with, because I love what I do. And if they didn't, they felt as if they didn't work the extra hours, their students wouldn't achieve. The stick, if you don't do the extra unpaid work, you won't be given any more work. And there might be a permanent job from it. So one of the people said, whereas other managers will manipulate people, there's always this carrot dangled of a potential permanent position. The power was in the hands they viewed of the managers. It made the relationships of the managers unstable. The lecturers were fearful. They had no presea. They couldn't speak out or felt they couldn't. So, for example, if we're unhappy and we complain about casual contracts, we're told, quit. I didn't feel I could speak freely because I didn't want to Outhwaite, because then they might not give me any more work. So it's a matter of just grin, smile and nod. Now on this, what I haven't done is put in the bit which was good, which meant that they could just leave if they wanted to and they could refuse work, but that was generally only if they were financially stable. And this had quite serious mental health and wellbeing issues for some of the lecturers. The managers, however, it was really interesting to listen to what the managers were saying, because what they found that the casual lecturers, they could just refuse work, leaving the managers with nobody to do it. The power was in the managers' hands. One of the managers said, because currently with my casual members of staff, they'll go above and beyond and they will do what they need to do to kind of impress and try and maybe get that full-time contract. And it created weak links in the chain for the students, for the managers, for the lecturers. So their workload increased. There was a lot less control of the workforce because, as one of the managers said, if you've got a lot of hourly paid lecturers, what are you going to do if they let you down? But the interesting finding is that the managers all knew what it was like because every single one of them had been employed at the start of their career on casual contracts. And they didn't particularly like using the casual contracts. They knew what the people were going through. They knew what the lecturers were going through, and they felt uncomfortable. I'll just speed up a bit. This is the last slide. Decasualisation. All the lecturers and all the managers wanted a policy of decasualisation. And the principal that I interviewed had already implemented a policy of decasualisation within their colleges. And they did this because they thought it helped retention, it helped loyalty and commitment, it helped a people-centred culture. In the managerial hierarchy lower down, they felt they didn't have influence over the employment policy. And the principal actually said, if I wasn't here driving it, they'd just have been on 0 hours. So without the principal actually taking Foucault's field of other possible actions, it wouldn't be happening. However, we do now have the Employment Rights Act, which is going to change temporary and 0 hours contracts, but it's mostly aimed at social care, warehousing, places where people do the same job day in, day out, and those jobs are generally always there. So one of the sections within the Act itself, if you read section 9, it says reasonable qualify a worker's employer to consider that the workers is only needed to perform a specific task for a specific period of time. And that can be delivering one module. So we need to see what happens with that. And I'm sure it will get played out in the courts. So that's it. Thank you. Whistle stop tour.
Thank you. I thought that was great. And actually having your slides up did kind of focus on your data and things, which you wouldn't have been able to do, I don't think, without having it in that format. And I can see that Jill, your supervisor, has been there rooting for you in the background, which is always nice to see.
Thank you.
Who would like to ask Helen some questions? While you were talking, Helen, actually, I was thinking that was FE. You had FE focused work. It could just as well be HE now, couldn't it?
Yes,
just
very much
worked its way through.
The only significant difference is, like I said, the pay in HE is significantly better. I did a full section in my thesis on comparing school teacher and HE pay. And even though school teacher pay and HE lecturer pay really doesn't reflect the professionalism and qualifications of the people, a lot of the FE lecturers have the same qualifications, and they at least £3,000, £4,000, £5,000 less than a school teacher.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? Anybody want to ask Helen a question? Megan, I was thinking of the emotion leadership work there while Helen was talking.
Yeah, true. And it's not an FE, because my first work was about FE actually in 1994. I wrote a piece about what, that when everything was happening and the changes.
Yes.
I don't think there's been a lot written about emotions and FE. I'd be pleased to be proved wrong, but that's quite an interesting area to explore. I know when we looked in 1994, there was such a lot going on.
Yes, it was interesting. Yes,
interesting times.
Yes, strikes everywhere, and the new contracts coming in, and the loss of the silver book contract.
Yeah.
That's about the same time I went into FE. I had my first post in a sixth form college in 1997. And I, of course, didn't get a choice, but then found out that a whole load of the staff in the staff room were still on their silver book contracts because they hadn't given them up. So I was teaching something like 24 hours, and I was working with colleagues who were only teaching 18. So it was a really, just as those contracts had rolled through, it made a tremendous difference on the workload in the sector. Fascinating.
And it's interesting, isn't it, that it's still I mean, there's much more research into FE, but it's still a Cinderella sector compared to the rest of the educational leadership field, I think.
It is, definitely. And this was something which was said in Jill pointed it out to me, because when she went to the BERA conference, somebody who I actually quoted in the thesis was giving a presentation there, and I found the quote, I found the actual thing, and it was Boris Johnson was giving a talk to a lot of FE college leaders, and he looked at them and went, secondary schools, secondary modern, very secondary moderns. So it's because a lot of people in power have never actually touched particularly general further education. They don't understand the importance and the relevance of it. So it's very much the third class citizen really in education. And it shouldn't be, even though I've left.
Well, and when you look that we've got, 950,000 NEETs at the moment, actually, it probably identifies a reason why the sector needs to exist and needs investment and needs the status and everything that you've been kind of clearly outlining, Helen. So absolutely fascinating. Thank you. Thank you, Jill, for persuading her to present. That was great that you were both here this evening. Fabulous. So we've heard from a couple of people now who have talked about their research and where they've been on their research journeys. And now we're going to go to Emma Kell to talk about her experience. And then Emma, you need to leave us after that, don't you, to go and do other things. So over to you.
Thank you. Those were both absolutely brilliant and both neglected and overlooked and wrongly so areas of education. So really interested in following your further research. And sorry, I have to dash off soon after this and I won't talk for too long. So mine won't be nearly as slick or precise or formidable as that. Interestingly, imposter syndrome started to creep in, which is always really interesting. I'm going to talk a bit more about the experience of doing an EdD. So yes, I mentioned earlier, it was a moment of sheer madness. I had a 8-month-old baby and a working full-time head of languages in a secondary school, very happy there in North London. And Professor Paul Miller and his colleague came in to give a presentation from Middlesex University, and they were recruiting for this EdD, and my head teacher has sort of noticed something in me, you know, that restlessness, that those itchy feet that you sometimes get in the course of your career. I imagine everyone here has done or doing a EdD or PhD, so you'll all know the feeling. And he'd spotted it in me, and he said, I think you should go to this. And I sat in this thing thinking, no. I had a 3-year-old at home as well, thinking, no, this is just bonkers. And there was a little part of me thinking, but I'd quite like to find out a little bit more. So my whole journey was bookended by 2 Pauls. There was Paul Miller at the beginning and has remained in touch throughout. And then there was Professor Dr. Paul Gibbs at the end. And Paul Miller gave me some really good advice right at the beginning, because I was going to write about school trips and their international trips and their impact on children's lives. And he said to me, do something you live, breathe and eat for breakfast. And I remember I was just passing junction 25 of the M25 when I suddenly thought, oh my goodness, this is what I need to write about. So I ended up writing a thesis called Shifting Identities, which was about balancing teaching and parenthood. And effectively, yes, writing my life. I do remember various moments that I remember from the process. I remember writing a Facebook post saying, I don't know whether I was doing my ontological and epistemological assumptions, and I was just in this soup of head hurtiness. And I remember just posting saying, I don't know whether I'm an interpretivist, a phenomenologist, or an existentialist. I don't know what I am. And eventually, with Paul's help, I realized I was a pragmatist, and this was beautiful. This just worked for me perfectly. And I ended up taking an iterative approach to the research, and I still use this word in my current work, because iterative essentially means you make it up as you go along. You do a bit, see how it's going, and I still use that. I used it yesterday with the school that I'm working with. And my research looked at the factors. I used Bronfman-Brenner's ecological theory, so micro, micro, and macro level, which either enable teacher parents, and I did fathers as well as mothers, because I noticed there was a lot of stuff out there on mothers, to thrive as parents and teachers, and the factors which cause them to struggle. And essentially my conclusions were that it is perfectly possible to thrive and indeed be a more effective teacher after becoming a parent, subject to having external support and finding the right context. And what was really has been really humbling about the research, it's been really interesting, Deb, thanks for asking me to do this, because I don't often join the dots, but it has led to everything else that I do now. It led to my work on teacher wellbeing. It's led to the 4 books that I've published, and it also led, so it wasn't just me researching in the area, a number of us researching in that area, and that work has been read by people like Emma Shepherd from the MTPT project. We know that 20% of people leaving the teaching profession are women in their 30s. So things haven't necessarily improved, but it's good to feel that I was able to be part of that important narrative. And yes, I did go back into teaching, but I also went freelance as well. So I do a little bit of everything now. But that research was a bit like buying a house or having a baby. I think I've blanked out the really painful bits. I don't, someone once told me I was a starter and not a finisher in an interview feedback. And I was really offended by that. And I think so there was a level of stubbornness that I was going to finish this. And I remember just dumping the kids with the childminder and then sitting at my kitchen table for 3 solid hours, blanking out everything else and working on my EdD. And then Sunday mornings were Starbucks. I went to Starbucks and I worked on my EdD. And there was a level of bloody mindedness and determination. And I do use my doctor, but I tend to use it in QuickFit and Premiere in more than I necessarily use it with my students or my colleagues, because it's just that, yeah, actually. So yeah, that's me.
Thanks, Emma. Just for the recording, because people will watch from further afield later on, just tell everybody what MTPT is.
Yes, it's called the Maternity Teach Paternity Teach project, and they have written a really, really powerful paper which was picked up by the BBC and all sorts, and called the Missing Mothers Project. And Emma Shepherd is a force to be reckoned with, and her team as well, obviously. But yes.
Yeah, and then alongside that, there's the work that Jolie Brearley's been doing, From Pregnant Then Screwed. So if you're interested in that area, there's a wealth of data out there now, which certainly didn't exist, Emma, when we were having those babies 16, 20, 25 years ago. So
in that performative environment where the sort of 80s feminism, where you had to prove you could be everything a man was and more. Yes.
But even if you did that, you still weren't good enough.
Oh, no, you still weren't good enough. No, because you were trying too hard, and then you were intimidating and pushy. Yeah.
Anybody got a question for Emma before she dashes off? Don't want to deprive anybody of the opportunity. No, right, you're good to go, Emma. Thank you for joining us this evening. Lovely to have you at
Lovely to see you all. Thank you.
Bye.
Over to you, Jo.
Thanks, everyone. You've just got me doing this as my daughter's walked into the room, so she'll be listening to it too now, but she's making me a cup of tea, so that's okay. My doctorate is in the field of teacher education. That's initial teacher education, and I train primary school teachers. And when I came to the university that I work at currently, I noticed there was an absence of any talk on race. We weren't monitoring outcomes of different racial groups or anything. It was just, hushed up. When I raised this, because I come from school where we were monitoring on racial outcomes, and I asked why we're not doing that, and I knew it was something that Ofsted might be interested in. Ofsted inspects schools and teacher education for those international people around. I was told, don't talk about race by senior managers. So I thought this was quite interesting, really. And I was asked to keep my mouth shut and shut up. But I didn't. I decided to study this and see what was going on, because I think it's an important issue. So I started my research looking into thinking about pre-service teachers, so the teachers that we were training to go into schools, to see their confidence around issues of race and what they were thinking about it, and whether they had the confidence to teach in multicultural classrooms, and whether they had the confidence to manage issues of racism that might come up in schools. But as I started that research, I realised that actually what was missing from the literature is research on teacher educators themselves. And so I then looked at my colleagues and other teacher educators, see what was going on and see whether similar patterns of race evasiveness or colour blindness, that both words are used in the literature, but was happening. And I then did focus groups with teacher educators, and I looked at interviews with pre-service teachers, and then I also did a policy analysis of central policy of education from, it was about, let me think, we met this right, 2011. So it was when the Conservative and coalition government came in and changed policy. So I looked at things such as the teacher standards, and that was one policy. I looked at the national curriculum. I looked at Prevent agenda, that's about terrorism and what's going on with Prevent. And then I looked at fundamental British values that came into government policy and school policy. And the last one I looked at is the core content framework, and that's the curriculum. Just one second for me, just not doing that, thanks. The curriculum for the teacher educators. Their core content framework is what teacher educators have to teach teachers to be effective in schools. So from the policy analysis and from the discussions and interviews with teachers and teacher educators and pre-service teachers, I found that there was some interconnected discourses around whiteness. And what I found was the biggest discourse that was there was, or is, race evasiveness. So not talking about race at all. And there's an avoidance of race in any policy. Prior policies did talk about race, did look at that and make sure teachers were able to talk about race. That's not in the current policies at all. So we've kind of hit a state in central government of a post-racial state. Race doesn't matter any longer, everyone's equal, we don't need to think about it. But the reality is that's not the case, and there is racial inequity. At least that's my position, and that's what I was arguing. So therefore, if we're not teaching our teachers to recognise it, to see it, and to have the confidence and racial literacy to talk about it, then we have a problem in our schools and in education. Aside from race evasiveness, there was a denial of racism, or making racism not as important. So you'd hear things such as, well, maybe is it really racism though, or is it a small issue, or perhaps they didn't mean it, it's just things they've heard at home, they don't really mean it, they're not racist. There was an idea that racism is something that might be individual, but it's not definitely structural, and there was no understanding of structural racism. So denying racism, there was white victimhood would come out. Maybe things have gone too far. Maybe we are being too equal, and by being equal, we're actually creating a divisive society, which also is central government's policy at the moment, to not talk about race. It's creating division. Religious and cultural othering was quite predominant in both the discourses in policy, particularly anti-Muslim discourses surrounding prevent and fundamental British values. And that also came through in practice discourse, where we would, I say we, because I include myself in this, but there's an idea that there's not something wrong with teachers and teacher education, but there's something wrong with cultural groups. So if someone's not doing well, it must be because of their culture, it must be because of their family, or something. It's very deficit views came through in the research. And then finally, the other one, which is protecting whiteness, protecting the property of whiteness as a critical race tenant, is through discourses of professionalism. And I think professionalism was used as a way to control, or is used as a way to control teachers and to silence teachers. So much so that one participant said that to call out racism in schools would not be professional. So you're in someone's space, so to call out poor behaviour was seen as not professional. So we have this idea of silencing that was going on too. The same discourses were linked through the policies. So in national curriculum, it's very white-centric. It doesn't say you can't talk about different races or different cultural experiences, but there are no clear examples of where you are asked to do that. It's a very white-centric curriculum, which clearly values white knowledge over others. So the white supremacy is coming through there. In prevent, we have an overemphasis on Muslims, and of course prevent does not say all Muslims are terrorists or all Muslims need to be monitored, and yet prevent policies do monitor disproportionately in Muslim areas, and so our educators then see this and also over-refer Muslim pupils as well. So we have this othering discourse that goes on. And besides the othering discourse that came through was a concept of religification, which is the idea that we then start seeing all Muslims as all religious, and we don't understand that there are different identities within Muslims, and not everyone is seeing their identities as a Muslim first. There are other aspects of identity, but that's sometimes missed. So all of that was done through critical race theory, was my theoretical framework, and I combine that with this theory of othering and theory of religification. The impact of this, of course, is that we have a white-centric teacher education workforce, and we are reproducing that within our teacher education, and therefore within schools we are reproducing that because we're not training our teachers and our teacher workforce to be racially literate, to recognise issues of race and issues of structural racism, and to be able to then change practice and disrupt practice from that. How's that? Is that quick enough? I feel like I've spoken really quickly. Has anyone got any questions?
I have a question.
Go on.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, fine. Hi, thanks, Joe. That was really interesting. This is a kind of ongoing issue, isn't it? I mean, it's. I just wonder what your recommendations are in your thesis and how actionable you feel that they are, how realistic, because it's a mammoth challenge, and I just wondered, in terms of the combination of your research, what are the key things that you would recommend as a step forward?
I think, well, if I could wave a magic wand, it would be the Ofsted assess for racial literacy, because as soon we know what happens, policy drives practice, and if Ofsted were assessing it, if it was part of the core content framework and the DfE required teachers to be racially literate, then we would see changes in practice. However, central government's going very much against that. It's an anti-racist perspective, where it's seen as you're creating divisions and divides. What I find when I talk to people, because we have done a lot of work since this, I collected the data in 2019, 2020. We have been working with staff and with students. If you had taken an intersectional approach to inequality, people are more responsive to it. The area where people get most upset and defensive is when race is talked about. So if you talk about feminism, or you talk about ableism, or you talk about heteronormativity, people can get on board a lot quicker. Race is the one that emotions arise. But Jill, it's been a battle for a long time, and another aspect of whiteness is the idea that someone who's white can come along and save the day, and that's not the case. And I've certainly eaten a lot of humble pie over the last 8 years or so while I've been doing this.
Yeah. Thank you, and good luck with the finalising the thesis and the Viva. I wish you every success.
Thank you.
That was fabulous. Thanks, both of you. It's really interesting, isn't it? While Helen was talking, I was thinking about a former Belmas Council colleague of ours, Justine Mercer. I don't know if you came across Justine Mercer's work, Helen, in your thesis, but while you were talking, Joe, I was just thinking about Ray Chatwin's work. I don't know if you've come across him. He, again, has contributed to many Belmas events over the years, and it always reminds me that they were doing work, goes to any of the race and educational leadership RIG events, he'll say, we were doing this work in the 1980s. We have been doing it a long while. It's just been forgotten that we've been doing it. And I think it's a fascinating thing, isn't it? Because we've had progressive governments who've gone, no, we're not having anything to do with that. So it sort of sets it all back all the time. Okay, brilliant. Go on.
Well, I was just going to say it's a power thing, isn't it, really? So, we've got this structure of power. So the powerhouse of white elites are not going to give that up very easily, in the same way we know men won't give up their power very easily, etc., etc. So you move so far, and then
we're back to structural and systemic issues. Yeah. So it would be interesting to have you back once you've been through your Viva next year, when we do a session like this, if we do a session like this, and to hear about that leadership impact. So you've got those findings, you're in a role where you can develop the leadership from it. So what comes from it, from that sense. Right, we're moving to Caitlin next. Now, those of you who haven't said you want to go next, after Caitlin's finished, what we're going to do is move to some 60-second slots. So if you want a 60-second slot about your work and you want to put in the chat who wants to go next, let me know. Caitlin, over to you.
Thank you kindly. I am doing an interpretivist study where I am doing a in-depth case study on a single school, looking at the ways that the particular school environment, as well as the senior leaders, support middle leadership development. And equally, how do the middle leaders actually measure their development and their impact of their leadership? So the particular school context is really important. As part of their strategic plan, they are explicitly aiming to develop the leadership capacity of middle leaders. So I suppose I'm going in and watching from the balcony as opposed to being on the dance floor to be able to more or less go, okay, this is what you're aiming to do. How do you know that you've actually achieved it? And the context has brought about some really interesting things in the preliminary findings. I'm, wading knees deep in my findings chapter at the moment. And the consistency of participant responses has been really, really interesting. So, much like, was it Emma spoke before about an iterative process? I too have purposefully done an iterative data collection process where I interviewed a group of middle leaders 3 times last year. And this year I'll be interviewing senior leaders. In fact, I've got one in an hour and a half's time to gain some additional perspectives. And the middle leaders across their 3 interviews last year, the consistency was really, really interesting in that they are having a really comparable experience. It's also brought about, not only has there been some significant professional development opportunities that the school has put in place to explicitly address the strategic intent of middle leadership development, but there's a lot of structural things that the school have in place, often historically, they have in place already, and in some cases, new senior leadership initiatives have actually put in some significant structural supports for senior leaders, for middle leaders, in order for them to actually practice leadership. So something that I'm looking at the minute is the way that these middle leaders are able to practice leadership more than they're able to practice management, and that's actually having an effect on their leadership development. Something that I was looking at yesterday, which I still need to really get my brain into to be able to understand it more so, but the fact that all of these middle leaders have a significant teaching load as part of their role. I haven't quite worked out if it's playing a factor, but playing an important part in their leadership development. But the fact that the majority of my middle leader participants are unprompted, telling me, I love teaching, I love the classroom. One of the reasons the middle leadership is attractive to me is that I get to maintain that part of my job. So I suppose that's my job for this afternoon, is to investigate that more so. But yeah, it's also really interesting given that the middle leader participants that I've had conversations with, they range in age from like 30 something to 60 something, and even across different career spans. The consistency again in what they're telling me is really interesting, whether their prior experience at different schools or different employers are having an impact on the way they understand their own leadership development, or whether they've had a really long career at this particular school but served in multiple roles, the impact that is having on the way that they understand their leadership development. But if I can come back to the way that these middle leaders understand their own development, is really stemming from the fact that they are able to practice leadership more than they are able to practice managing. And I'm looking forward to gaining senior leader insights to be able to understand from their point of view, well, how do they support leadership as opposed to management from this core group. If I take a step back from my actual findings for a second, just to explain the Australian context really briefly, we are in what I'm describing as a continuous improvement environment, where continuous improvement in schools is the hot topic, and I'm sure that's not just in the Australian context, but as a result, the recognition of the value of the middle leadership band is becoming a really big focus, not only for practitioners, but also in the research. So it's really interesting too to hear, when I was sort of scoping this study and investigating with the school, their interest in participation, even the way that senior leaders at that point of my project were describing the importance of their middle leaders was really interesting. It was clear that they value it and clear that they have, to an extent, an understanding of the middle leader role in school improvement practices was of interest. So I hope that in an hour and a half's time, when I have my first senior leader interview, that's a theme that shines through. Now, I was a very poor educator and didn't look at what the time was before I started talking. Deb, how much longer do I have, or shall I wrap up?
Yeah, if you wrap up now, that's good. Megan and I were
Perfect.
actually with Pauline Thompson on Friday, and I was just wondering if you'd looked at any of Pauline. She's obviously in your own department, so yeah, there's clearly some overlap there.
Yeah, absolutely. She's done a lot of work on barriers and enablers for leadership work, and that is absolutely something that I'm drawing from.
Fab. That's terrific, Caitlin. Similarly, next year we look forward to an update on where you're at in those interviews, next one of which is later on today. Terrific. Helen Chatburn, did you want to come in and ask a question there? Because I can see that this is, I can remember back to your Viva. I see the overlap.
Yeah, I don't have a question, but I'm really interested by your research, and it's very insightful already. I was looking at teacher professional autonomy and how school leaders in general promote that in teachers. And I observed that in the international schools in Nigeria, then there was quite a significant difference between more executive leaders or heads of school and middle leaders in terms of how much autonomy they had and how much autonomy they wanted to promote in their teachers. One thing I observed, I just sort of saw that I didn't dig too deeply in it because it wasn't exactly the topic of my study, was that I noticed that middle leaders tended to be more reserved in their support for teacher professional autonomy. And I think that might be because they feel a bit more organizational pressure inside their schools to manage in some ways. Do you see that at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm almost finding the inverse of what you've described, Helen, that these middle leaders are incredibly autonomous, and that the way that they understand their autonomy is that the senior leaders often position their own initiatives at the center of their support conversations. So the middle leaders are essentially provided with quite significant scope to be able to enact their role in the way that best suits them and the way that is best suited to their particular department. So, for example, there are some middle leaders who write their own department strategic plan. They're not asked to, they just do it, and they're supported to do it. There are some that will say, come to a senior leader and say, hey, I'm really interested in developing this new subject within my department. And they're supported to do that. So the question of autonomy has been a really, really curious one. And that's actually how I started drafting my findings chapter, because I thought that was a really manageable chunk for me to do. But that it was really important for these people.
That was terrific, Caitlin. Lovely questions, Helen. So what we're going to do, thank you both of you. It's brilliant. What we're going to do now is move forward because we've got 15 minutes left, and time goes really fast on these things, doesn't it? So we're going to do rapid fire. So we're going to do literally 60 seconds. So Ulrika and Lujana have offered to go next, but I'm literally going to time you and then cut you off. And then Helen, I would love to come to you, Helen Chatburn, for you to do 60 seconds on perhaps where you are now, so how you feel kind of retrospectively, perhaps looking back, if that's okay, if that works. Okay, so we're coming to Ulrika first.
Okay, no pressure. So as I mentioned, I'm in the third year basically. So I'm literally just about to start my research phase once I've got my ethics signed off, and I'm looking, like I mentioned, at professional learning for work-based learning practitioner asked the question if that is in need of reconfiguration. And I think for me, sort of the key thing to bring across, and I think in a sense, Jake, but you mentioned that you're obviously sort of in your second year. If I think, and Deb, you were at my presentation last year in October, and how my thinking has changed, I think it's really about sticking with what you care about, what you want to do. If you're being pushed into different directions, explore those. But I felt, I've had some very hard discussions with my supervisors where we've gone around the village, but I've ended up almost back at the starting point, but with the receipts to prove why am I doing what am I why am I doing what am I doing and what I'm going for. And I think it's just really sort of that sticking with your guns and going with it and sort of seeing where it's taking you. I'm doing a narrative inquiry with a narrative analysis as well. So I'm putting practitioners and policymakers into dialogue within sort of my research findings, and I'm looking forward to it, terrified by it, but I think it'll be really exciting to see what's going to come from it, because it's an area that's not really researched that heavily at all.
Less than a minute and a half. Well done. We're all very, very impressed. We could do another whole separate evening on managing your supervisor, Megan, couldn't we, really? And supervisory relationships. I'm really pleased you've raised that. That's a really good one. Okay, so hopefully we might get a minute or two to come back to those. I'm going to move straight on to Lujana in the meantime. Off you go.
Thank you, Deb. So my research is a connection between the social sciences and the applied sciences. My background in engineering taught me to think more about system design, and the flow of work. And then the other background, which is educational leadership and management, was more about the interest of the complexity of people, values, fairness, bias, the meaning of bias, how data is being processed in neural networks, how the outcomes are coming out, and why. We also had a brilliant reg session the other day with Dr. Roger, who spoke about that, and our focus was more about how leaders act in terms of data. So my research is about producing feedback in higher education using AI tools, but mainly to link the values of higher education institutions using their statements, either by their vision, mission, goals, or values, and the feedback as an element that is given to students. And then we create, with that tool, we create reports on 3 different levels. So we have the micro, the macro and mega levels reports. So this is mainly what I can say, but talking about iterative practices, we do 2 things here. We're bringing some of the concepts from industry into education, from engineering industry. So we bring Agile Manifesto, which is the iterative practices, both in software engineering and management, to produce what we call Agile feedback. And this is a paper that will be published in a couple of weeks, which changes the way we measure the effectiveness of the feedback for students using the Agile principles. Then we produce a specific type of what we call quality, and that's lean manufacturing. Then we use some of those concepts to basically reduce waste and increase value of the feedback that we produce. Instead of having bank of feedbacks that we give to students and stays there for years and we don't use it, we're going to use that feedback in a very effective way and produce reports for either the NSS, quality assurance, accreditation bodies, and other policymakers. Thank you.
Terrific, Eugenia. 2.5 minutes, and it's like this. It's like when you first say to students, "Just tell me your thesis in a sentence," isn't it? I mean, that thing of can you say 60 seconds but actually get it in under 3 minutes? Well done. the interdisciplinary nature of your work and the fact that it still has this important social science, leadership element to it, I think is absolutely fascinating. If you were not with us the other week when Dr. Devery Rogers did her keynote for our AI and Elma rig, it's on the website. Go and watch it. It was put on the website a couple of days ago. And I met Dr. Dev a couple of years ago. I thought I was giving an opportunity to an assistant professor. Turns out she has 35 years leadership experience in schools, and I knew the session was going to be great, but it was terrific, wasn't it? It was really great. Yeah. So do go and watch that. Right, Helen, I'm going to come to you, Helen Chapman. I'm just going to give you literally sort of a minute about what you've learned from kind of coming through the other side, or whatever bit you want to focus on.
Yes, thank you so much. I think that it's a strange thing to not have the thesis on your mind all the time, and to not be really thinking about this and thinking, oh, I should have done this, or what about that? Did I include this? Did I include that? That was a relief. That felt like a relief not to have that anymore. But now, we're getting to about 6 months later, and I think it was Emma who was talking about the itchy feet, and you can feel it coming back. And so I know it's time for me to regroup and really start writing and looking how I'm going to publish from my thesis. I worked full time the entire time that I was doing my EdD, and I'm still working full time now. So it's really challenging. And as a school leader, the past 5 years have been the worst out of the whole 20 that I've been doing it. So, for many reasons in schools. So I think that Emma also said that she got through it by being stubborn, but I think it's about perseverance. It is a test of perseverance to get through it, but it's also a very excellent feeling to be recognized for your expertise. And I think that that's what it's given me, a big freedom in that sense from myself. There's a bit of imposter syndrome for sure that I carry, but yeah, I feel like I bring it back to my practice, and I feel more confident in my work, and I enjoy it a lot. As you can see, I've still got my title here. I'm still kind of, in the honeymoon phase with it. I'll get over it, but not yet.
I think you should leave your title there. That's fine. That's well fought and well defended. I think that the challenge for school leaders in the position that you're in, Helen, is just finding the time, right? You've got a great piece of work there. Finding the time to take it down to an email paper of 8,000 words is the big challenge, isn't it? It's that quality of work. Absolutely. It's just about managing to do that. That was terrific. Thanks. And I think that will be really helpful for everybody else on the call today. Wendy's also put a note up about publishing, so that's great to see, Wendy. Before I bring Wendy in, I was just going to check that neither Jake nor Harry wanted to do a quick minute on theirs before we finish. Jake, do you want to just do like 30 seconds or something?
30 seconds. Right, it's really in its infancy. 2 years deputy head. There's no training to prepare you for this. What do you do when it gets really tough? What does it mean to be resilient? It's not about just enduring through it, coming in, day out. Actually, I think it's more about pivoting and doing what's right for your values. How do you know about your values? I think it's more than just identifying them. I think you need to trace them back to their source to truly have that awareness of them and then your professional identity. That comes from the significant people and events that happen in your life. And my current thinking is you can create almost like a professional tree that acts a lot like a family tree. Because you think about the times when you look at your family tree is when you've maybe had that bereavement or you're having a really hard time. I think similar could happen with a professional tree of some sort. I mean, 30, I could talk so much, but yeah, 30 seconds, there you go. Can I just say this has been really helpful though, because I've made so many notes about the sorts of things I need to start thinking about and including from the people far ahead. So honestly, this has been really great.
And that's the object. That's terrific, Jake. Thank you. But that's the object of these sessions. So Christina started with saying, how much she got from the sense of community and everything. But it's that opportunity, isn't it? Helen, I totally understand your electricity's about to go. That's absolutely fine. Harry has also told me that he doesn't want to say anything because his signal is really bad. Very similar parts of the world as well. Really great that you could join us tonight, Helen. And I think Rosemary has also disappeared now too. So Wendy, can I just bring you in there just to talk about that publications journey, that sort of next stage on very quickly?
So once the virus out the way and you celebrated and you drank copious amounts of tea and actually slept, then it's the whole publication journey. And that's actually really exciting because you can kind of sort of delve back into it, into your thesis. And for me, it was like, well, what bits do I want to actually pull together and actually push out, and where to as well? Like, what type of journals do I want to go for? And so for my first one, it was very much about my findings. So it was not about the leadership aspect, although I do want to actually look at my whole thesis, which focused on families of sanctuary who have special educational needs children from a leadership angle. It was very much about they decided which journal to go to. So I opted for the International Journal of Inclusive Education. I've got to say, the support I got from everybody, it was just amazing. And I put it into the journal in December, and it got approved in February, and it's out. So it was it was really quick. And now it's like, well, where's your next one? So it's a bit sort of cathartic, but it does give you a really good opportunity to actually not look at the big thing anymore, but actually look at the sort of the smaller elements of your thesis. And it was so 2 journal articles are currently on the go and a book chapter from it. So, and I think I will be done after that. So it's all good. Yeah.
Then you'll be on to the findings from your project because you've got your first PI role, as you told us at the beginning. So it's all that circle, isn't it?
Yeah, so that the report study's gone off to the DFE, and so it's like, well, what do I do with that now? So it's it doesn't stop.
So I don't want to go beyond 9 o'clock because we've had a great 90 minutes, really enjoyed kind of the discussion and meeting people. But what I did want to do very quickly before we finish, so I'll put myself under pressure and do it in 30 seconds now too, is just make the links back to all those Belmas research interest groups. So Lejana was talking about her AI and ELMA group. Caitlin, while you were talking, when Helen was talking, there are some great presentations, in your work you could do for our LPD rig, and I'm pretty sure that Bernie's already spoken to you about that, but do keep in touch with her about that. She's one of my co-conveners in that. Christina, I know you're in touch with our Leadership in Early Years Educational Research Interest Group. Jake, great to see you having a go at presenting some of those kind of thoughts. And actually, Jake, your tree that you were talking about, Christina, I think this comes back to our sense of community, doesn't it? So that's what we're doing, right? We're putting those roots down and thinking about who we're tracking in our work and thinking about who we're kind of connecting with. And I think you all saw that right at the start when Emma was waving at Megan and Megan was sort of recognizing Emma coming into the room. So we've got that kind of whole full circle approach, haven't we, going on? So this is our community. It's been great to have your company and for you to join us as our early career researcher evening. We'd love to see you in some of those other events. Harry's just put a second up saying, can I have some seconds to talk about my research? Of course you can, Harry. So you get the last final slot. Off you go.
Okay. Thank you so much, Deb. I really appreciate this opportunity. I would be very quick about it. So my research is an evaluative case study about leadership preparation and development program that was piloted recently in Ghana. So it was part of the it's part of the reform which the education sector, a reform within the education sector to transform leadership from the traditional mode to a more transformational one. So I observed the pilot stages, and I used sequential mix method to gather data, and then to find out much about the policies that are underpin leadership preparation and development in Ghana, and then also find out how candidates are selected for such programs. Yeah, so throughout that, I am currently doing the, I've done the analysis already, and I'm doing the discussion. So there are much more to be learned about how leaders transform policies into practice. So some of the findings I had were that most of the principals, it's for them to participate in the program was an eye opener to them, even though they have the practice. They were really not aware about the kind of leadership practice they were involved in. And as it has been a gap, there is a policy on leadership development, but in preparation wise, there is a gap. So the program was to bridge the gap. And after the evaluation of the program, cabinet will have to sit on it, and then if it's approved, then it becomes a preparation program where aspiring principals will be able to go through the program successfully, and then assume their roles as principals. Yeah. So that's a quick one about my research.
That was a really terrific run through, Harry. So is Tony one of your supervisors?
Yes, please.
So I think similarly to Caitlin, I think there's a great session actually, Harry, with you and Caitlin and Helen Chatburn presenting about those perspectives from different parts of the countries, different parts of the world. So I'll be in touch with all three of you about that. I thought that was a really great contribution to finish on there, Harry. Thank you very much. That's fabulous.
Okay. You're welcome. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much for staying, everybody, even though we were 5 minutes over. I've obviously talked too much. My voice is going. But really lovely to have your company, and look out for other ECR events and do what Emma said earlier on in the call. So look out for people on LinkedIn. You know, that seems to be where we go now as opposed to anywhere else. And it would be nice for you to make those connections and continue those connections. And obviously, if you're thinking about publication, look at email, look at MIE, and join your research interest group. Get in touch. info@belmas.org.uk or chair@belmas.org.uk if you want any more information. Nice to see you all. Have a lovely rest of the evening.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.